Thank you for joining this presentation. GIS is now everywhere. Professionals needed. My name is Erica Close, and I am a doctoral candidate in the College of Education and Professional Development at Marshall University. While I am a student in a curriculum and instruction doctoral program, I also have been in GIS education for a number of years and have spent time working with GIS professionally. So I am sort of uniquely positioned to be looking at the development of this GIS education curriculum for high school students. So let's talk about GIS in American high schools. Multiple states, organizations, and education entities are currently developing high school geographic information systems, or GIS, curricula. Each one has a different approach and a different focus. Some have designed these amazing semester-long curricula, while others look more like multiple semesters in a program that's really designed for adult learners. And while these models for multi-semester GIS curricula exist for higher education degree programs and for professional certification programs, transferring those to a high school certification is not really simple. So today I'll share a curriculum development proposal that explores the research surrounding the factors involved in developing a high school GIS curriculum for students in the state of West Virginia that's aligned to current trends in certifications and credentials. And I'll share a plan for developing 4 courses in GIS designed specifically for high school students, as well as the foundational educator professional development that will be required in order to have educators to support high school students along this path. So let's look at GIS. So GIS has been around for over 50 years, and the research around the use of GIS and other digital mapping technologies is growing. GIS has become a discipline in and of itself. It's a discipline that forms a bridge between many other disciplines like math and literacy, geography, computer science, earth science, and GIS education itself is a recognized research community. These GIS education experts investigate geography and education, as well as the pedagogy of teaching and learning with GIS. It's a really fun group. So within the field of K-12 GIS education, the integration of GIS into content instruction is a clear choice for student-centered activities, student projects, and student investigations. In the K-12 education realm, there's an increasing knowledge of using GIS in classroom instruction. More and more classrooms are involving GIS as time goes on. Now, while the integration of GIS into curriculum and into disciplines and content areas is more common, there are few curricula that exist at the high school level that are specifically focused on GIS technology. So the curriculum development proposal presented here is for a 4-course sequence that follows the model of many career and technical education pathways, but creates a program that's accessible to regular high schools as well as CTE schools. And what it will do is it will allow students to deeply explore a career path that's aligned to a measurable career standard, which is what CTE programs do. When we look at the literature that surrounds this issue, several factors and considerations come to light. Namely, the difference between teaching content-integrated GIS, so using GIS to support content instruction, as opposed to teaching specific software skills and applications. Those are 2 really different processes. Secondly, developing a student pathway that is focused on software and data analysis leads to the question that are the students actually developing spatial thinking? Is it not just software, but are they actually understanding what it means to be a spatial thinker and to approach data spatially? GIS itself is growing in popularity among educators, but in order for a curriculum to be successful, a parallel professional development curriculum is going to have to be created to prepare the educators that will be guiding the students through this process. And then lastly, as we look at the literature, it is clear that the chosen curriculum that we develop has to be defined. It has to be aligned to some sort of professional standard. And most importantly, it has to be measurable. We have to know if it's actually covering what we want it to cover and having the results that we want it to have. So these 4 issues make up the literature review that I will discuss today. As we've discussed, while the importance of the integration of GIS into content area K-12 classrooms is absolutely recognized, the explicit teaching of GIS technology by classroom educators is just now becoming more common. The U.S. Department of Education stated years ago that professional technology should be used in American classrooms as a demonstration of how they're used in careers and to promote student learning. That's really easier said than done. The geospatial industry, so those who use GIS, is one of the absolute fastest growing industries within the United States. Thus, it falls into that category of professional technologies that should be used in American classrooms. What's also growing is a movement within secondary and career and technical ed schools for students to graduate high school with professional certifications. Now, while these professional certifications really are standard in CTE, professional certifications are just now moving into regular high schools with a goal of equipping high school students with career credentials prior to entering college or the workforce. Research shows us that students who participate in CTE programs are more engaged, they tend to perform better, and graduate high school at higher rates than their counterparts. And more than 70% of students that complete a CTE program continue on to some sort of higher education. So it's pretty clear that learning a professional skill, if possible in high school, especially in a supportive high school environment, has become a new norm. So in keeping with a growth in CTE programs, both in CTE schools and regular high schools, West Virginia has determined that a certification pathway in GIS is important. So furthermore, it's also a priority to develop different methodologies to prepare teachers to move students down that certification pathway. So in addition to developing the certification pathway for the software, it's imperative that this curriculum also develops spatial thinking in students. Spatial thinking was defined as a skill set with the publication of Learning to Think Spatially in 2006, which described how spatial thinking can be incorporated into many different disciplines. Spatial thinking is defined for you there on the screen, but what the research shows us is that even working with GIS as a really small component of classroom instruction in middle school and high school develops these spatial thinking abilities. Additionally, these types of classroom integrations with GIS tend to lead to really good classroom instruction, tends to lead to classroom instruction that is inquiry-based, problem-based, and it tends to include the kind of classroom activities where students work towards solving real-world problems and just developing those problem-solving capabilities. So spatial thinking in this curriculum will need to be both addressed and assessed as the curriculum is developed. Key to developing a curriculum for geospatial technologies is developing professional development for educators. Geospatial technologies are not commonly used by educators worldwide, though their usage is increasing as materials and software become more and more readily available. Currently, the integration of GIS into pre-service teacher preparation programs is being discussed in the GIS educational research community, though the actual current integration is still somewhat limited. So developing professional learning opportunities in GIS for educators has been widely studied. Some methods classify how likely teachers are to integrate GIS into their classroom instruction, while others look at the format of the training that the educators receive. So current research surrounding educator preparation in geospatial technologies concludes that educator professional development needs to take place over extended time periods, be taught both in person and online, include both software concepts and the concepts of spatial thinking, and also include the development of a community of support for educators. The last key theme to developing a GIS curriculum is the development of the set of content standards to be addressed, as well as a method to measure the goals and outcomes of the curriculum. It's key that this GIS curriculum aligns to standards for GIS professionals. And the guiding document for GIS professionals is the Geospatial Technology Competency Model, which is accessed through Career One Stop in the United States Department of Labor and the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And additionally, the National Geospatial Technology Center of Excellence has developed something called DACMs, which are developing a curriculum. These are standards for GIS courses based on specific career paths in GIS. And then lastly, within the GIS community, GIS professionals have something called the GISP, which is the GIS Professional Certification. So each of these will be looked at, and as a curriculum is developed, it will be assessed by these standards so that it is in alignment to these standards. So additionally, the curriculum is going to be developed so that it can be measured by research standards spatial thinking measurements. This is an area of research that is somewhat young. There is one such test called STAT, which is the Spatial Thinking Ability Test, which is a test of 16 questions that look at 8 different aspects of spatial thinking. Other researchers have also developed a set of transfer questions that involve the use of an interview, which is coded, to look at the degree of spatial thinking that a student has attained. Other research also looks at using a science-related tool, a CER or claim evidence reasoning protocol, to measure a student's problem-solving ability, which is going to develop along with spatial thinking ability. So each and every one of these different assessment methods will be evaluated and looked at, and probably a combination of these will be used to develop an assessment tool for this curriculum. So let's talk quickly just about the curriculum development. The ultimate purpose of the development of this curriculum is to have one that, when completed by a student, will allow that student to be conferred with a certification by a governing body, something like the State GIS Policy Council. So given that a student-centered GIS certification doesn't exist at all nationally, it's up to states and different entities to develop their own. That being said, the development of this curriculum will not necessarily be done in isolation, as there are many other groups that are exploring similar development processes. So in order to develop this curriculum, given that the certification will likely be conferred in our state by an organization like our State GIS Policy Council, the curriculum will have to be developed in accordance with the State Department of Education policies. So a group of stakeholders and educators will be convened to develop a set of content standards for the 4 courses that will lead to certification in GIS. And these standards will be written in such a way that they'll cover material that's common to introductory GIS courses at the college and university level that are developmentally appropriate for high school students and that are in alignment with the Geospatial Technology Competency Model, the DACOMS, as well as the GISP. So this group of stakeholders and educators will have quite the job, but I am certain they'll be able to assist in the development of this curriculum. The stakeholders will be members of the local GIS community, the West Virginia Association of Geospatial Professionals, representatives from local colleges and universities that have GIS and geography programs, as well as West Virginia certified educators. And once these standards are written, specific lessons and activities for these standards can then be written. So as the standards are developed, a parallel curriculum, as I said, will also be developed as professional development for educators. It's anticipated that many of the same activities that the students complete will also be completed by the educators. It's also anticipated that the educator professional development will occur in a much shorter amount of time as opposed to the 4 courses. But regardless, as that parallel professional development is being developed, it will be designed in such a way that it aligns to the different sets of standards that we have previously discussed, but also deals with the pedagogy of teaching with GIS. Many entities will be involved in this curriculum development project, ranging from K-12 educators to higher education representatives and from professional organizations to software development organizations. And finding balance among these entities will be a challenge when developing this curriculum. However challenging, though, the wide array of entities that are involved in this process will lend itself to the development of a deep and rich curriculum, which has the potential to drive enrollment in higher education geography and GIS programs statewide, as well as to support the development of a robust GIS workforce, which is needed both across the state of West Virginia and nationally. Thank you so much for listening to this presentation. I'd like to thank many folks that have been supportive of me in GIS education for many years, the GIS educator community, Esri education staff, as well as my chair, Dr. Lisa Heaton from Marshall University. Thank you.